What a difference a month makes! Earlier in August, Russia seemed to be making progress in the Donetsk Oblast thanks to its summer offensives. Villages were falling. The vital city of Pokrovsk had been penetrated. It seemed like only a matter of time before Vladimir Putin would finally have what he wanted out of his special military operation. But that's all changed. Ukraine has retaken Pokrovsk and cut the Russians off, and now it's going on the attack. Ukraine rips through the Russian front in Donetsk to take back what's theirs in a stunning turnaround. And best of all, Ukraine did it on the country's Independence Day. On August 4th, the Kyiv Independent reported that Ukraine had just pulled off an impressive operation that saw it liberate a trio of villages in the Donetsk Oblast from Russian occupation. The commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian armed forces, Alexander Syrskyi, took to Facebook to announce what the country's soldiers had managed to pull off. In a statement where he provided a general overview of a recent visit to Donetsk, Syrskyi said, "Our troops have successfully counterattacked and cleared the enemy from villages in the Donetsk region, Mikhailivka, Green Grove, Volodymyrivka. Once again, I express deep gratitude to the combat brothers and sisters for their rank in these great crucial days." For context, Green Grove is the anglicized version of the second city's name. It's known as Zelenyi High in Ukraine, according to the Kyiv Independent. Beyond that, we don't know a huge amount about how Ukraine managed to liberate these three villages. In its report on Ukraine's trio of liberations, United 24 Media explains that Syrskyi didn't even share which Ukrainian units were responsible for the counterattacks in Mikhailivka and Volodymyrivka. However, the army commander did note that he'd visited soldiers from several units, including Ukraine's 68th Jaeger Brigade, its 25th Air Assault Brigade, and both the 32nd and 155th Mechanized Brigades. We can only assume that these brigades had something to do with the counterattacks, if only because it seems to make sense that Syrskyi would learn about the liberation of the villages from direct conversations with Ukraine's soldiers. However, United 24 says that we do know a little more about the liberation of Zelenyi High. The Ukrainian Navy confirmed that fighters of the 1st Marine Battalion of the 37th Marine Brigade, together with other elements of the unit and the 214th Separate Assault Battalion, OPFOR, participated in the earlier liberation of Zelenyi High, the outlet says. The Kyiv Independent adds that Zelenyi High is located about 60 miles away from the city of Donetsk, which Russia currently occupies. That shows how far Putin's forces have managed to reach as they push for the Donetsk Oblast's administrative border, the capture of which would finally give Russia control over the region. More importantly than that, all three villages are located south of Pokrovsk, but we'll get to that a little later in the video. For now, the liberation of three villages that Russia had captured is a massive shot to Putin's goals in Donetsk. For Russia, the capture of any village should be followed by fortification and consolidation of its position, allowing it to create a constantly advancing front line that slowly ekes territory away from Ukraine. To have three villages, for which Russia would have sacrificed dozens of its soldiers to capture, slip out of his fingers so quickly is a real gut punch. Oh, if only it were just three, Russia will be thinking. The three most recent village liberations come on the back of Ukraine also retaking Novomikhailivka. United 24 reports that Ukraine deployed its 3rd Army Corps to retake that settlement, which is also in the Donetsk region. Ukraine's soldiers apparently caught the Russian forces occupying Novomikhailivka by surprise, leading to an assault in which Russia lost a full company of its troops. A company can contain anywhere between 100 and 250 soldiers, meaning Russia must have attempted to solidify its position in the village, but had become complacent. Regardless, that's a lot of soldiers to lose in a single engagement, and Russia has been forced to redeploy reserves to make up for the lost numbers. Redeployment means weaknesses are created elsewhere. Even if Russia launched a counterattack in Novomikhailivka, Ukraine may have more openings to exploit. By the way, Novomikhailivka is located in Ukraine's Pokrovsk district, and in this village's case, we know that the retaking of the settlement saw Ukraine coordinate between its intelligence agencies, assault troops, drone operators, and heavy equipment specialists in a coordinated assault that turned Novomikhailivka into a graveyard for Putin's soldiers. So it's not three villages that Ukraine liberated on its Independence Day, it's 4. And those 4 liberations cap a week where Ukraine has been very busy in the Pokrovsk region. On August 25th, a day after Ukraine's Independence Day counterattack, UA Wire published a report in which it said that analysis of battlefield reports from the Deep State organization revealed that Ukraine has been kicking Russian soldiers out of villages left, right, and center for about 10 days now. A series of Deep State posts lists roughly a dozen locations where Ukrainian forces saw gains over the past week, from August 15th to 17th through August 25th, the outlet says. The village of Tolsta was liberated on August 22nd, UA Wire reports, and the period between August 15th and August 17th saw Ukraine retake Hruzka, Rybizne, Novovodiana, Petrovka, Vesela, and Zoloty Kolodiaz. And in the Sumy Oblast, Ukraine pushed back forces close to Andriivka also on August 24th. It's starting to look like Russia can't keep hold of any territory that it's been taking from Ukraine during the summer offensive. That's particularly the case near the city of Pokrovsk, which brings us back to our earlier mention of the 3 villages Ukraine just liberated, all being south of that settlement. Russia needs to capture Pokrovsk. What Ukraine just pulled off on its Independence Day has just made that goal a lot harder to achieve. To understand why, we first need to take a look at what Russia has been trying to achieve in Pokrovsk over the last few months. Just before the country's summer offensive got underway, Ukraine announced that Putin had dedicated about 110,000 troops to the Donetsk Oblast, most of whom will be trying to make the push into Pokrovsk so that city could finally fall under Russian control. However, a direct assault on the city wasn't possible. Ukraine knows how vital Pokrovsk is due to its status as a logistics hub, which it uses to provide supplies and reinforcements for all of its soldiers in the Donbas region. So Pokrovsk is fortified heavily against a direct attack by a large contingent of Russian forces. Where it's vulnerable is if it's subjected to smaller attacks from multiple directions, which is where all of the villages that Ukraine has spent the second half of August liberating come into play. On July 30th, the BBC reported that Ukrainian media were already highlighting the dangers it saw near the front lines in Pokrovsk. Intense fighting in Donetsk had seen Russia make some fairly significant advances to the east and west of the city, highlighted by the captures of villages that it will be able to use as springboards in a multi-front offensive against Pokrovsk. The BBC highlighted a Pravda report in which the outlet spoke to several unnamed commanders in the Pokrovsk region who discussed their fears. The first group of the enemy is already in Radinska, and they are also active on the approaches to Belitska, one of the anonymous commanders said at the time. If they capture these settlements, logistics will be cut off at Mirnorad, creating an encirclement. We risk losing the people who have held back the enemy on the axis for almost a year. We fear it may end like in Avdiivka or Vuhledar. Mirnorad is another key settlement close to Pokrovsk that's also vital to Ukraine, and you can apply everything the commander says here to Pokrovsk. Russia's strategy was starting to pay dividends.